it is a day after the election. So we're going to do what we always do. I shouldn't say, this show has only been around through one primary. It's still a really new show. So we've only had one election happen, and as long as this show's been around, and it was the primary in June. Some of you guys remember that show. I was painfully depressed because it was a brutal primary in California. I'm not somebody who likes to tie up a loss and put a bow on it. That's not something I'm a fan of doing. You guys know that about me. I'm a big fan of winning, which some of that happened last night, some of it didn't. There's some things to be excited about, and there's some things to kind of still be a little bit discouraged about. And I would have liked to have seen some other things in the win column versus the losses column. But let's break it down and talk about it, and then I'm going to talk to you guys too. So whenever you have good news and bad news, I like to do bad news first. I like to end on something positive. So let's do the bad news first. Well, first of all, here in California, the two biggest things I was hoping for had nothing to do with any candidate. The two big things I was hoping for was public banking and rent control, Prop 10, which would enable more rent control on the ballot, the possibility for more rent control on the ballot. Both of those lost. The public bank lost, and rent control lost too. They poured a lot of money into fighting that rent control. And, big banks, I guess, poured a lot of fear money into scaring people off from these socialist banks. Ooh. And both of those lost. Kenneth Mejia lost. Rodolfo lost. Maria Estrada lost. Those were all endorsements I made. And none of them were quite able to pull it off. They all worked hard. They all fought hard. Maria Estrada, in particular, she went up against a multi-million-dollar campaign with about $4,000, and she got nearly half the vote. So she worked hard, but it wasn't quite enough to overcome the machine that Anthony Rendon had at his disposal. So those were some rough losses, And let's see, what else were some? And then going nationally, Beto O'Rourke, of course, was not able to pull it off against Ted Cruz. Andrew Gillum was not able to pull it off in Florida. And, what's interesting about those two candidates, they started really hard on Medicare for All, then they kind of backed off on policy and lightened up on it a little bit. Gillum started campaigning with Hillary Clinton, and then Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and he lost. He started out with a lot of momentum. He started off by about 10 points, and then when he started doing all that stuff, it declined. I'm not going to say that racism also didn't play a role in that. I'm sure it did, but you can't help notice how when certain actions were taken, certain numbers started to plummet. And I don't think it's just because people want these policies. I think it's because people want strong convictions. I think people want solutions, they want explanations, and they want strength. And when you back off of policies and don't stand behind them and don't try to sell them, that's when you get a little bit... That's when you get less enthusiasm at the final breakdown. So, Beto was not able to pull it off. Andrew Gillum was not able to pull it off. So, and let's see, what else can we put? I mean, the big thing for me was, what happened at the local level here in California. We're not going to get a public bank in Los Angeles, which that's not just sad for Los Angeles, that's sad for the country. Because if you would have seen a public bank in Los Angeles, that really would have laid the groundwork to transform our politics. And other cities would take note. So those were some big losses. And trying to think of other losses. What else do you guys? Let's stay on the negative category first, and then we'll go on to the positives. What were some kind of? Jordan points out none of the candidates that you voted for won. All right, and I guess another thing, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Yeah, that was a huge one. Tim Canova. I couldn't believe those results. I just couldn't believe those results. With how hard he worked and how he really got it done on the ground. I don't know. And were those genuine results? I don't know. At this point, it's impossible to say. But I find it hard to believe. I find Tim Canova's results very, very hard to believe. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a known cheater. So I'm not saying anything one way or another as far as, but I will just leave it at, I find it very hard to believe, those results. I find them very hard to believe. I mean, that Republican who was basically non-existent all of a sudden got 36%, Tim Canova, I mean, I find it hard to believe. And what else was pretty disappointing? Feinstein retained power. Of course, it's rough seeing her in office. But like I said yesterday, and I stood by it, I couldn't justify voting for her opponent either. I didn't vote for either one of them. I left that blank. And if I voted again today, I'd leave it blank again. I don't see the benefit of trading in a wolf in sheep's clothing that at least a lot of people know is a wolf for another wolf in sheep's clothing who is younger and not a lot of people know is a wolf. So I didn't vote for De Leon. He ran a pathetic campaign. And I'd leave it blank again. It's tough watching Feinstein in. And I know a lot of people that just voted against Feinstein, and I get it. And if you did that, I'm not here to shame you. I don't blame you. But, no matter what I do, when you give someone something to vote for, that's when you got a shot at winning. When you only give someone something to vote against, that's when you lose. Once again, happened in California. Kevin De Leon did not give people anything to vote for. He gave people something to vote against. They can vote against Feinstein. And Edwin's pointing out some voter suppression that was going on in Georgia. We're still watching that unfold in real time. That was another, pretty ugly moment from last night. All right, so let's move on to the positive. There is some positive. Let's move on to that. First of all, we'll stay in Florida for a minute, even though there was a lot of discouraging news. They did give convicts the right to vote, so that was huge as far as voter rights goes. That was a good thing. A lot of DSA-backed candidates won. A lot of them. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York. I made a little list here. Summer Lee in my home state of Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Fielder, also in Pennsylvania. Rashida Tlaib in Michigan. Sarah G. Emirato in Pennsylvania. Ilham Omar in Minnesota. Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts. Scott Walker, as Edwin points out, is gone. Goodbye, Scott Walker. And I tweeted this. I was like, well, the last person leaving Scott Walker's office, please turn out the lights. By the way, those lights were probably made possible by a union electrician. Goodbye, Scott Walker. Let's see. What else is there to be? A lot of propositions passed in a lot of... First of all, every Fight for 15 backed proposition for living wages passed. There weren't a lot of them, but they all passed. And they were in red states. They were in Missouri. They were in Arizona. They passed. What else happened? A lot of the establishment candidates, they lost, proving that ain't work. That doesn't work. Claire McCaskill lost. John Tester nearly lost, just hung on by the skin of his teeth. Jordan points out Michigan passed all 3 propositions. Legal pot, gerrymandering rules, and same-day voting. Michigan got it done. And they got Rashida Tlaib. So it was a good day for Michigan. It's a good day for Michigan. So, those were some victories, some reasons for optimism. In Arizona, they were also going to vote for clean air and water, and there was a ton of shenanigans that happened. Patricia points out ex-felons can now vote in Florida. We mentioned that. What other good news am I missing? Let's focus on the good news now. And what happened with pot in Utah? Yep, voters relaxed marijuana laws in 3 more states, Michigan, Utah, and Missouri. Prop 2, medical marijuana legalization approved. In Utah! Not necessarily a progressive hotbed. So, Prop 6 in California, Edwin, was a no. There's some good news and there's some bad news. And guys, I want to end on the most important piece of good news, obviously. The big piece of good news here is Lucy, my cat, made her television debut yesterday. I mean, guys, let's focus on what's really important. You take the small wins where you can. Lucy made her television debut yesterday. You can see that over on RT at Crosstalk. She crushed it. She stole the show. And it went straight to her head, though. I got to be honest with you guys. I woke up this morning. She had a rider for how she wants to be fed. She wants her food arranged a certain way. She said, no more brown M&Ms. And I said, you're a cat. I don't feed you M&Ms. And she said, well, I'm just saying. Anyway, no more brown M&Ms. So, yeah. And I think you guys are kind of summing it up. Here in California, we lost big time. Things in California, we really shit the bed. There were some progressive victories across the country. That's a good thing. There were some establishment losses proving that method has failed and it's over. And, it was really rough to see Nancy Pelosi speak, where a bunch of progressives won in spite of the Democratic establishment, not because of the Democratic establishment. And a lot of them won anyway. And then you listen to Nancy Pelosi speak, who promotes a bipartisan marketplace of ideas. Progressive policies are winning in red states. People want living wages. People want legal pot. People want an end to gerrymandering. People want those things, and they're winning. People want clean air and water. People want jobs. And Nancy Pelosi talks about a bipartisan marketplace of ideas. How blank suit and uninspiring can you get? But we all know it's by design. So, there's some reasons to stay optimistic. But there were a lot of losses too. Definitely.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news